Welcome our speaker for this evening, Quincy from Woodland Hills.
Hey, Quincy!
I was more than happy to let you just keep going. Totally fine by me. Hi, my name's Quincy and I'm an alcoholic. Oh my God, what an amazing room this is. I'm always so happy to come here. Thank you, Carl, so much for asking me to come. It's always an honor to be here. The energy in this room is so amazing and you guys have such a great place to go to meetings and I'm so happy to be here. It's so exciting. Congratulations to all the chip takers. Chips are a big deal, you know. I didn't think they were a big deal until I didn't take them. More on that story later. But they are a big deal. Anything we do here is a big deal, and then everything's not a big deal at the same time. You know, I don't know. I want to thank Lulu, my road dog, for coming out here with me. I recently went and spoke in Palm Springs and drove 3 hours by myself. Number one, by myself. Did not talk to anybody for 3 hours. Right? And then was listening to a book on the way there. So I got up at the podium and I forgot my story. I was like, what am I talking about? Why am I here? Oh yeah, it was. So I told her, I said, I'm never doing that again. I'm never ever going somewhere by myself because I have to talk about myself to somebody. So I'll make a complete fool of myself, which I may do anyway. I don't know. So thank you, Lou, for coming. I'll tell you some important information so you guys can judge me properly. I have to remember them. My sobriety date is February 1st, 1988. It was a long time ago. That may be the other reason I forgot my story. My home group is the Principles Before Personalities meeting in Sherman Oaks, and my sponsor is Leslie E. And when I came to Alcoholics Anonymous, I wasn't looking for any of those things. I wasn't looking to be honest, I wasn't looking to be accountable, and I was not looking to be responsible, right? I was here basically to get my mom off my back, to get everything to calm down, and then I was going to go back to life the way I wanted it. And, you know, it's, when I think about, you know, my childhood and how I got here and when I started drinking, like, I've always been that kind of person who needed something outside of themselves to make themselves feel better. Like, I could never just feel good by myself. And even when I was with those things that make me feel better, I was always second guessing it and judging it and wondering if it liked me as much as I liked it. Or, you know, I was always thinking and I was always in my head. And when I was a little kid, I had two things that I loved more than anything in the whole world. And that was my father, who was the love of my life. He was an alcoholic. He worked in the music business. He designed album covers, so you don't have to ask me later. But he was super fascinating and super interesting and so much fun. And he loved to drink. And he loved to drink, and he also loved to let me drink, which was great, right? I remembered this the other day as I was forgetting my story, that when I was a little kid, he was a scotch drinker, and he used to put scotch on the rocks all the time, and he would drink the scotch, and then he would let me eat the rocks. And it was the greatest. Like, there's nothing better than scotch-soaked rocks, like, let me tell you. Especially when you're 4. Teething was fantastic. And so that was just the atmosphere that I grew up in. There wasn't anything wrong with it. Back then it was, you know, considered fine or funny. Today it's considered child abuse. But back then it was fine. And that was just how my life was with him. He and I shared a lot of the similar passions. We could talk about anything. We could be in the same room together and do nothing together. And he was just my most favorite person in life. The second thing that was my most favorite thing was I was a dancer. I was a ballerina, and I loved to dance. I loved it because it took me out of myself faster than anything else. And so I've always been looking for a reason to get out of this body, right? Because in this body and in this mind, I can't function, right? I'm uncomfortable. I'm overwhelmed with anxiety. I'm toxically insecure, right? I'm emotionally so immature I can't stand myself, right? And that was just the way that it was. You know, I remember my first drunk because it was like it was yesterday some days. Some days it feels like it was yesterday, and some days it feels like it happened to somebody else. But depending on how old I'm feeling on that day. But I remember it like it was yesterday because it was one of those moments where all of a sudden all those things that I loved and all those things that I wanted in my life, I was willing to give up everything for it. And I have a cousin who's eight years older than me, and she she was having a party. She was graduating from high school, and she invited me to this party. And she was the kind of cousin that liked to turn you on to stuff, right? She taught me how to dye my hair and shave my head and pierce my ears and tie my bondage pants, important things. And what bands to like, that kind of stuff, Black Flag, whatever. And so she taught me all about all of those kinds of things, right? And so she was having this party, and I walk into this party, and it's all 18-year-olds, and I was like 11. And I was, at 11, I was the tallest girl. I had the biggest boobs in the room. They hadn't grown since, but at 11, I was smoking hot. And smoking. What I wouldn't give to get that 11-year-old body back. Trying to be her ever since. Anyway, but I went to this party, and they're all sitting around drinking, and I just remember being that kid who was in their head, who couldn't get out of their head, who was like, oh my God, are they going to know I'm 11? Are they going to treat me like I'm 11? Am I cool enough? Am I funny enough? Do I say the right swear words? Do my ass look cute in these jeans? Like, that's all I can think about, right? And they invited me to sit down and play quarters with them. And I had never played quarters ever in 11 years of life. But I sat But apparently I sat down and played like I had been playing my entire 11 years of life. And I had a great time, right? And all of a sudden, as the alcohol was going into my system, everything got looser, right? Like my arms got looser, like my chest got lighter, my head was like happy, everything was funny, like everything was funny. But the greatest moment about that night was that for the first time in my whole 11 years of life, right, everything that was going on in my head that kept me on fire was gone. And it was quiet, right? And that was the magic of alcohol for me. Alcohol made everything that made me emotionally immature, toxically insecure and overwhelmed with anxiety disappear like that. That was the magic of alcohol for me. Did I become a daily drinker at 11 years old? No. But did I become obsessed with it from that point forward? Absolutely. And would I give up everything that I fell in love with in my life to make sure that those were the things I had? 100%, right? I grew up in the San Fernando Valley. Doesn't make me an alcoholic, but it helped. And and 11 and 12 and 13 years old, I was, drinking as often as I possibly could and sliding out my bedroom window and getting in a cab in Encino and taking that cab over the hill to Hollywood and hanging out in the clubs in Hollywood all night, every night of the week, and coming home at 4 o'clock in the morning, sleeping for 2 hours and getting up and going to school. And that was my life. And I didn't think there was anything wrong with that. Right? I didn't think there was anything wrong with that. Everybody I knew was doing that. And if somebody wasn't driving that I knew, we all just took cabs. Like, it wasn't a big deal. But I got to tell you, this is when Hollywood was a scary place 100 years ago. It's not like Disneyland like it is now. Like, I would get caught in the middle of, gang shootouts and police holdups and all these kinds of crazy things that used to happen in Hollywood. And I loved it. Like, I loved everything about it. And I never thought for 1 second that my drinking and using put me in those kinds of places. Never once. And I didn't care. Like, I thought I was a part of life. I felt like I was in the middle of everything, and I was more than willing to keep doing that at any price, right? If that meant pissing off my father and him trying to kill me, 100% I'm all for it, right? If that meant giving up a lucrative and very promising dancing career, I was 100% willing to do that and did that. Was I willing to give up any friend? Absolutely, because everybody is replaceable. And that was really how I felt for a long time. And this cousin of mine who liked to turn me on to stuff, she was my drinking buddy a lot of the time, and she was a lot of fun. Like, she used to love to go to bars, and she was how do you want to say, friendly with a lot of doormen, and as a result, like, when she would bring me to bars, because I didn't really look old enough, they would just let me in because they were all friends with her. And so I got to go to places that most people didn't get to go. And was it normal for a 14 and a 15-year-old to be sitting in bars drinking her face off? No, not really, but it happened. And I was willing to pay the price for whatever that happened, whatever it took for that to happen. And I was in Santa Monica recently. We went to Yuckaholics, and you have to we parked in this parking structure in Santa Monica, like right near the 3rd Street Promenade. And we were up on this one particular tier, and I all of a sudden had a flashback to when I was drinking and using, and I had woken up naked in the back of somebody's car in that parking lot a couple of times, right? And that was just what it looks like for me when I drink. See, I don't know about you, but for me when I drink, I lose the power of choice over what's going to happen. Meaning, I can't tell you if I'm going to have one more drink, 100 more drinks, if I'm going to be naked, if I'm not going to be naked. I'm almost always naked. Let's just put that out there. I'd love to say that the naked problem stopped when I got sober, but it did not. But for a long time, I thought I had an allergy to clothes. I just wasn't sure. Right? But every time I drank, I would put myself in harm's way. Not because I wanted to, but just because that was where I had to go in order to get what I had to get. And it scared the people in my life. Not that I cared, because it didn't scare me. Right? I went out with that particular cousin, I don't know, all the time, and as a result of that, I just had really interesting experiences. My dad's alcoholism got worse, and as a result of his alcoholism getting worse, he went into rehab in 1981, which was a really long time ago. And back in those days, if you were in the music business and you went into rehab, it was, you were immediately blackballed from the business, right? Today you could come out of rehab with a record deal, but back then it was bad news. And so everybody that we were friends with and the life that we had become accustomed to living disappeared overnight, right? And all of a sudden we went to having everything to having nothing. And my whole life changed. And my mom ended up going to Al-Anon. Are there any Al-Anons in the room? Yay. Okay. Don't be a shy. Don't be a shy. None of us would be here if it wasn't for you all. So everybody's always afraid. Oh yeah, we're Al-Anon because they're gonna get screamed at or something. But my mom started going to Al-Anon, and as a result of her going to Al-Anon, they said, "Oh, you have children? Well, we have meetings for children too. They're called Alateen. And you can bring your child, and they can talk about the alcoholism in the family, and blah, blah, blah." And my mom fell for this hook, line, and sinker, and she came home to tell me, she's like, "Oh, you're going to love it. You get to go to Alateen." And I remember thinking, lady, like, you already gave me the weirdest name on the planet. Like, you think I need any more reasons to be weird? Like, I don't want to go sit in a room and talk to a bunch of wackadoodles about how messed up you two are. Like, I don't care. I got my own thing going on. Leave me alone, right? But again, I lost that battle because I was 11, and I just remember thinking, oh, God, if I'm going to go to this meeting, I'm going as faded as I can handle, because I am not talking to no losers. Like, I'll go sit in a bush. Like, I'll go for a walk. Like, I'll go, I don't know, rob the liquor store. I'll go do something, but I'm not going to this meeting. And we drive over the hill. I'm as stoned as I can stand, and we drive over the hill, pull up in front of the church, and I look out the window, and I see the most beautiful boy I have ever seen in my entire life. And I went to Alateen religiously for the next 7 years. Because this is a program of attraction rather than promotion. We don't really care what attracts you here, just stay. And they did. It was fun. We had a really good time. We would go and we'd sit in these meetings and we would talk about what a mess our parents were and how horrible it was to live in an alcoholic home. And then we would go try it. And we would get super hammered. We would go to the SoCal convention in San Diego, and we were all on the committee. We were all on every committee for every convention. It's kind of like Acupa, except they're a little older. But we would all be like on these committees, and you'd put like 16 teenagers in one hotel room. You know what that looks like, right? Drunk, butt naked, covered in shaving cream. I mean, who wouldn't be, right? I mean, what else are you going to do with 16 teenagers in a hotel room? Like, that sounds like fun, and that's just the way it looked for me, I couldn't stop from getting naked. I couldn't stop from humiliating myself in my drinking. I couldn't stop from feeling like I wanted to die and not being able to. Like, nothing was working. Everything sucked. I was always uncomfortable, and drinking had started to stop working. It had started to stop making it... I started to need more and more and more in order to get to that place where I could stop forgetting what happened, and it got harder and harder. And when I was 15 and a half years old, I went out with that cousin who liked to turn me on to stuff, and we went to a bar called the King's Head, and in Santa Monica, and we went out and we'd started drinking, and I looked at my watch and it was like 10 o'clock at night, and the next thing I knew it was like 5 o'clock in the morning, and I was in the alley across the street from Grumman's Chinese Theater, which is probably like, I don't know, 15 miles away, totally different part of town, 15 miles away from where I was, and my clothes were torn and there was blood all over me and I was sleeping next to a bum. And at 15 and a half years old, that is not a normal reaction to alcohol. That's just not normal. That's not normal, right? My reaction to alcohol is extremely allergic, right? You put it in, and I am not stopping until it stops. It's kind of like having sex with a gorilla, as Carl always says. It ain't over till the gorilla says so. And it just ain't. And that's what my drinking looked like. And because I had been around Alcoholics Anonymous, and because I had been in rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, I knew that what was happening to me wasn't normal. But I really believed that this was a math problem. I really believed that if I just got rid of the drugs and the alcohol, that everything would be fine, right? That everything would go away, right? But if you're anything like me, right, you take the drugs and the alcohol away, and all that toxic insecurity and all that overwhelming anxiety and all that emotional immaturity comes rushing to the surface and has absolutely no filter and nowhere to go, except all over the person standing next to you, probably. And that's what happened, right? I got sober and I went to meetings, but I didn't go to meetings in the sense of like I was going to get a solution. I went to meetings because I knew that if I went to meetings, I would be around other people who were sober, but I wasn't really interested in the solution. Don't talk to me about God. I'm not interested, period, right? And I don't want to hear about the steps because truthfully, like I don't need the steps to know that if I just get rid of the drugs and alcohol, I'll be fine. See, I'm super arrogant and super defensive and super defiant and super right. All the time, right? And you can't tell me nothing, right? And that was my attitude at 15 and a half, at 18 and a half, at 40 and a half. No. And that was my attitude when I came here. So I would go to meetings and I would stand in the back of meetings and I knew all the right people and I knew all the right things to say, but I wasn't actually doing any of the work here. I was just going to meetings. I actually heard a friend of mine say that there's two kinds of sobriety. She said there's meeting-based sobriety and there's book-based sobriety. She said meeting-based sobriety provides a lot of relief, right? You go to a meeting, you get relief. You go to another meeting, you get relief. You go to another meeting, you get relief. But you have to keep going to meetings to get relief. But if you have book-based sobriety, then you have freedom-based sobriety. Because if I follow the steps and I follow the suggestions in the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous, then all of a sudden I have that freedom of bondage of self because I understand what that means. I understand what the solutions are. I understand what the tools are. And I can go to a meeting where nobody discusses the solution at all and still feel free. Because that happens a lot, right? So I was in a tremendous amount of bondage, right? Because if you're not doing the deal around here and you're just going to meetings, then you're listening to yourself thinking, I'm so right. You people are so wrong and so lame, and I am so right about how wrong you are, right? And the more right I became about how wrong you are, the farther and farther and farther away I started to get from Alcoholics Anonymous. See, I don't know if anybody can relate to this, but I'm a case builder. Right? Does anybody in here build cases? Right? You piss me off or hurt my feelings, and I am going to build a case against you that's going to kill you in my life. Like, you'll be dead. I'll never talk to you again. That's it. It's over. Right? Clip. Bye. Right? And that's what I do. But I do that not just with people. Right? I do that with places and things. I can get mad at things. I was mad at a bicycle 3 years ago. That's a whole other story. But I'm a case builder, right? So I'm going to meetings and I'm doing the deal. I have all these commitments and I'm not working the steps, don't have a God, but I've got lots of commitments and I have lots of friends and I'm, just racking up resentment after resentment after resentment after resentment because I don't have a sponsor. I'm not running my thoughts by anybody. I'm not saying, does this sound like a good idea? Because, somebody might say, no, that's a horrible idea. And then that means I'm not supposed to do it, and then I have to kill you. So, because then you might tell somebody. So anyway, I start to build a case, and I copped a resentment at somebody in Alcoholics Anonymous, and I said, you know what? Y'all are drama queens and gossip mongers, and I am too, but we're not talking about me, we are talking about you. And I am 18 years old, and I may not really be an alcoholic, right? And with that was all I needed to go out. Right? And I was out and off to the races one more time. And I didn't pick up where I left off. I picked up where I was, right? And where I was, I needed a tremendous amount of booze, right? And condiments, as somebody said the other night, to escape what was going on here, right? Because there is nothing, anybody here who's relapsed, right, knows that there is nothing worse than a head full of AA and a belly full of booze. It's almost like the booze makes that stuff like reverberate in your brain. Like it's louder than it ever was when you were even sitting in meetings sober, right? It just gets worse. And so it was really, really loud in my head, and I had to get really, really drunk. And I started blacking out a lot. I blacked out for most of the time I was out. I don't remember a lot of it, but I don't need to, right? All I know is that on February 1st of 1988, I woke up mad, just mad, right? Because one more time, I was still here, right? I don't know how to be here. I don't know how to function, right? I'm overwhelmed with anxiety. I'm emotionally immature. I'm toxically insecure. I have two skills, right? I can either sleep with you or punch you, and if you're lucky, you'll get them both at the same time. Those are my two skills, right? That's the only way I know how to function. That's the only way I knew how to deal with those three things, right? And so I didn't know what to do, you know? And I said a prayer on February 1st that I believe every alcoholic says at one point or another, and that prayer's helped me. Now, I don't know who I said that to. I don't know what I said that to. I asked my father when I was 5 who God was. He said he was. That was the end of my religious upbringing. Explains my relationship with men, too. Anyway, so that was, you know, so I don't know who I said that to, but I detoxed in my room for a couple of days, and then my mother, who is the most amazing Al-Anon I know, finally beat the door down, and she's like, you need to go to a meeting. And I remember thinking, lady, I am not going to meetings. Like, I'm fine, I will stay sober, but I'm not going to meetings. I don't like those people. I'm not going to hang out with those people. And this was, I don't know, 8 o'clock in the morning that morning, and by 5 o'clock I was in a meeting, because I don't know about you, I can't stand to be by myself, and I can't stand my own company, so I got to go be with you people. And I walked into a meeting, and somehow y'all knew I was new. Not sure how you knew. Not sure if it was the Daisy Dukes or the bikini top or the candies I was wearing, but somehow you knew. And, you know, and you all walked up to me and you were super nice to me and you remembered my name and you offered me cigarettes and you're like, come on, we're going to coffee or we're going to the dance at the Platonic Temple or whatever it was. And, you know, you're more than happy to take me anywhere you guys were going. And that's the greatest thing. You know, if you're new, I beg you to find a group of people that you can tag around with, because trying to do this alone is almost impossible, number one, and super, super lonely. But number two, this deal can actually be really fun. Like, when I think about my first couple of years of sobriety, it was a lot like this room. There was a lot of young people. There was a lot of energy. We were together all the time. Unfortunately, we're all sleeping with each other, too, but that's a whole other program. But that was just the way that it was. I mean, it was the 80s, after all. But, you know, it was just a really, really long time ago. But that was what got me through my first couple years sober. I couldn't have done it if it wasn't for the people I was hanging out with. You know, it was everything. Everything was the friendships. Because if this wasn't fun, I wouldn't still be here. You know, I remember thinking, if I get sober, I'm going to be bored for the rest of my life. Like, I don't know what I'll do, you know. And I've not been bored yet. You know, my father used to say, whatever you do, don't be boring. And as a result of that, I've never been bored, really, right? Boring is a lack of creativity, he used to say. If you're bored, it means you're not creative enough. And I have found amazing things to do with my time in sobriety. So anyway, so I got sober and I started going to meetings, and somewhere around 60 days, some crusty old guy. Oh yeah, you guys have some crusty old guys here. I mean, you're not... You can pick them out. Some crusty old guy decided to walk up to me and give me his opinion of my sobriety. He was like, you need to get a job. I was like, whoa, old man, you need to shut up. Like, don't talk to me. And he's like, no, you need to get a job or you're going to drink. And I was like, what? He's like, yeah, you have way too much time on your hands. You need to go get a job. And he scared me to death. So I was like, what do you do when you're 19 years old, don't have a high school diploma, can't find your ass with both hands? Like, what kind of a job do you get, right? So a girlfriend of mine was in rehab, and I went to rehab and saw her, and there was all these people sitting around the rehab talking to other people about the 12 and 12 and AA and all this kind. I'm like, I can sit around and talk to people all day. How hard could that be, right? So I go and I get an application, and at the top of the application it says, what's your sobriety date? well, I'm a lot like Bill, and I fancy myself a leader and see myself running vast enterprises with the utmost of assurance, and I would prove to the world that I was important. And I thought, well, if I put down my original sobriety date, how will you know? I mean, I don't remember that 6 months. How will you? I'm only as sober as I tell you I am. And so I put down my original sobriety date, and they gave me a job, and it was the greatest thing ever, right? They kept me busy, boy. I was, working 12 to 14 hours a day, strapping kids to beds, throwing them in the druggy buggy, taking them to a different meeting every night. It was fantastic, right? I was like smoke in Alcoholics Anonymous. I was never in the same place twice. Nobody knew my name. It was fantastic, and I was super busy, and I loved it. And then one day I woke up, and it was February 1st, 1989, and I was shocked. I was like, holy hell. Like, I've been sober for a whole year, right? But it was, but I had a problem, right? I had a problem with that sobriety date. And I don't have any tools because I don't have a sponsor, and I hadn't really read the book. I mean, I've been telling people what the book says, but I hadn't read it. And so I didn't really have any tools, and I thought, well, I'll just drink, right? I'll just get drunk after work because, y'all will feel real sorry for me if I get drunk. But if I'm a liar, y'all might throw me out, right? Because we don't lie here. Nobody lies. And so I had come up with this plan, right? That after work I was going to get loaded. And I must have been super depressed about my plan because I walked into work and this girl I had never seen before was like, she's like, you look like hell. I was like, oh, nice to meet you too. She said, what is your deal? I said, well, I'm a year sober today. She goes, oh my God, that's amazing. You should be so happy. I said, well, I would be if everybody here didn't just see me take a cake for 4 years a month ago. She thought it was as funny as you fuckers did. This is my life we're talking about. That shit's not funny. She's like, she busted up. She's like, oh my God, Quincy. She said, nobody is thinking about you as much as you are. She said, nobody cares. I said, sure they do. She goes, trust me, nobody cares. Right? And she was right, And, nobody gave a shit. And but I talk about that because it talks about in the back of the big book, which is my favorite couple of pages, it talks about in the spiritual experience, it says that honesty, open-mindedness, and willingness are the essentials for recovery, right? And there's a huge difference between physical sobriety and mental, emotional, and spiritual recovery. They're not the same thing. It only takes one of those to be physically sober. Willing. I just have to be willing to not pick up a drink or a drug, and I will stay physically sober for a long time, right? But to get the recovery part, I got to do all three of them, right? I got to be willing, I got to be honest, and I have to be open-minded. And that's really hard for somebody like me, because that's a scary place. See, I'm somebody who can't deal with not feeling like I'm in control, right? Not because my conflict comes from feeling like I'm not in control. And so I'm constantly doing the same things over and over and over again, with the same solutions over and over and over again, because I know what I'm going to get, I know how it's going to go, and I know how to fix it. It may not work, it may make a mess, but it's my mess, right? And so I just do the same things over and over again because it's all I know. And I don't know how to ask questions. I don't know how to say, help me do this differently. Because I'm so afraid you're not going to like me if I look stupid that I won't ask questions, right? But I'm also very much into rewarding myself, very much. And so when I had told the truth, I felt like I deserved a reward. None of you have ever felt this way, I am sure, right? But I needed a reward because I was good. I had grown. I had told the truth. It was amazing, right? And I found my reward. I had to have him. I had to have him, but they don't really like it when you date the patients. So I had to get a new job, right? Because I got to have him. Right. I got to have him. I mean, I can get another job. Jesus. But I'm never going to have another him, right? God forbid. So me and the newcomer, we're going to move in together. I had quit my job, right? And we had signed, you all know how this story ends, right? So we had signed a lease on the house, and we were going to move in together, and the day we're supposed to move in together, I walk up, and on the front door is a Post-it note that says, sorry, babe, split town with my pregnant ex-girlfriend. My face looked like your face right now. a total meltdown. I was crying and snot and shit flying everywhere. Oh, God, it was ugly. One of those real ugly cries, right? And I said to my friend, I go, oh, my God, what do I do? She goes, you need a sponsor. I go, do you know one? She goes, yeah, my stepmom, she's a sponsor. I go, let's go to her house right away. Right away. Take me there right away. So we go to her house, and I'm crying, and everything's just happening. She goes, and she was this lovely woman. She had 6 years sober, and she was sober in AA, as far as I knew. I met her that minute, but she was a member of AA, and I told her all of my problems, and the man, and the house, and I don't have a job, and she said, I have the most perfect solution for you. I said, okay, and Regina was a stripper, and she said, Quincy, I think you should be a stripper. She said, you'll find a man there, you'll make lots of money to pay your bills, you'll be fine. All problems solved in one thing. I was like, okay, right? Like, I love to dance, right? I had been a dancer my whole life. I was like, oh, this is a calling from God, right? Because, it was a sign. This is something I have to do. And the thing was, I thought because she was in A&A that it was an A&A suggestion, right? Because I'm not reading the big book. I'm not reading the 12 and 12, right? I don't know what the AA suggestions are. So if it's be a stripper, I'm like, okay. Right? So I found some shady people in AA to make me a fake ID, and because I wasn't even 21, and I went down to the local bar and got a job as a stripper, and had the time of my life, I must tell you. And I did. I actually learned how to be a lady in that there bar. You have to remember, I came to Alcoholics Anonymous an angry little boy. Okay, that place turned me into a girl, at least. You had to cross your legs, and you had to say please and thank. Oh God, it was awful. Anyway, and it was actually great. I bonded with all the other sober strippers. We learned how to play pool, and we hustled pool all over the state of California and Arizona and Nevada, and made a whole lot of money and had a lot of fun. It was great. It was a lot of fun. And my best friend, who was sober and was the lead stripper of this club, she decided to leave the business and join the circus. True story. She was leaving her boyfriend behind. Now, her boyfriend hated me because I was the person she would always say she was with when she was out fooling around with somebody else. And he knew, but I was never going to tell on her, right? And so he came up to me at the party and he said, so I think you and I should sit down and make amends. And I said, sure. He's like, she's leaving town, like, we shouldn't hate each other anymore. I said, all right, fine. So he calls me, and we went and we had coffee, and we talked it all out, and we mended some fences. What's so funny? And then we mended a few more things. Yeah. Well, let's be really clear. Even amongst strippers and hoes, there is rules. And you do not date your friend's boyfriend, no matter how she feels about him. And I went from making $1,000 a day to making $7 a day. And so I had to get a new job. And what do you do when you're a used-up stripper hoe? Where do you go from there? You go into real estate, like any good one. What? And I would love to tell you that this only happened for the first 5 years of my sobriety. It did not. It took me almost 13 years of sobriety to hit bottom in Alcoholics Anonymous, to become willing to do this somebody else's way. Because I came here falling victim to the belief that if I just got rid of the drugs and the alcohol, I would be fine. And that's not the case for me, somebody who's really alcoholic. You see, my alcoholism shows up regardless of whether I'm drinking or not. The physical allergy part is super crucial to this whole thing and really important. But just because I got rid of the alcohol, I replaced that alcohol with almost anything else that would make me feel good and make me feel differently than how I felt. Anything other than using the steps and finding a power greater than myself that would help solve my problem. Anything other than that. I would lean on anything to make me feel better instead of those things. And it took me 13 years in Alcoholics Anonymous to be dry to the bone to be willing to say, I give. Now, I don't recommend that for anybody, by the way. You know, it's hard. It's horribly painful. Horribly painful. And it's awful, right? But when I was 13 years sober, I walked into a meeting, and it was the last meeting I was ever going to go to, ever in life, because I was done with Alcoholics Anonymous. And it was a big book study. Now, I had never been to a big book study prior to this evening, ever, in 13 years, because that's where the lames are. And there's never hot men in a big book study. Or so I thought. And, or so I thought. I would never go looking for them there. And I just thought this is the last meeting I'm ever going to go to. And one of my favorite crusty old-timers was leading the meeting, and it's the kind of meeting where they read 5 pages and they call on people. And I'm sitting there with my arms crossed and my snarl on, and he's like, you, happy pants, share. And I vomited all over the meeting about how much I hated you, how much I hated Alcoholics Anonymous, how I didn't want to be here, how this crap doesn't work, blah, 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 blah. Right? It was gross. It was really, really gross. And at the end of the meeting, another one of my favorite old-timers walked up to me, and he put his hand on my arm, and he said, Quincy, he said, AA is full of sick people. Do not expect them to act well. And I knew in that moment that not only was he talking about you, he was talking about me. See, I had been walking around the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous carrying the disease of alcoholism, not even knowing that that's what I'd been doing. Because I wasn't studying what alcoholism was. I wasn't learning about my disease, so therefore I was not learning about my solution. So I didn't know that what I was doing was actually practicing sickness in every ounce of my life, right? The next person that walked up to me was the craziest, scariest person that ever walked up to me in my entire life. And she was crazy scary because she was the kind of person whose whole deportment shouted that she had a real answer. And I don't know about you, but I'd spent my whole life staying away from people who had a real answer. Because if you got a real answer, then that means you're going to want something real from me, and I ain't got it for you, right? But she shoved her card in my hand, and she said, Quincy, she said, I'm really good at getting free of resentments and doing column work, and if you want some help, I'm more than willing to help you. I remember thinking, what resentments is she talking about? Like, I was so out of my mind, I couldn't even identify my own resentment. And I remember thinking, well, I'm going to go. There was a woman in that meeting who apparently was my sponsor. Apparently. And she had been apparently my sponsor for 3 years. I had no idea. And I'd only talked to her like 4 times, I think, in 3 years. And I thought, well, I'm going to walk up to her and see what her solution is. And I said, well, I think I'm dying from alcoholism, and I could really, really use some direction. And she said, well, Quincy, she said, I sentence you to this meeting. And I remember thinking, I've been going to meetings for 20 years at this point. 20 years. 20 years I had been in meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I was no freer of the bondage of self that lives between my ears in that moment than I was than when I had gotten here. You know, going to meetings to get recovery is kind of like watching porn to be a better lover. You can get some good ideas there, but if you don't get in there and do the work, it ain't happening. For all you porn watchers. Yeah, we got none of those in this room. So I asked the crazy scary lady if she would be my sponsor, and she was so excited. She looked like she was going to eat me. It kind of scared me. And she said, Quincy, but I have some requirements for sponsorship. And I said, I got some requirements too, that you have no requirements. I didn't say that because I'm not stupid, but I said, okay, what are they? She said, I need you to call me every day for the first 30 days and a minimum of once a week thereafter. I said, okay, that sounds logical, right? I can do that. It's not as easy as it sounds, but I can do it, right? She said, I need you to go to 3 meetings a week, one of which is a meeting that I go to. She said, because if I don't see you, I don't know you, I can't help you. I'm like, that makes sense. I can do that, right? She says, I have a sponsees meeting at my house once a month where we're going through the 12 and 12, and she said, I'd really like it if you would show up for that. And I remember thinking, okay, sure, yep, I'll come to that. She said, but Quincy, this next thing might kill you. And I'm like, oh, bring it, right? She said, Quincy, it is a requirement of my sponsorship that whenever you are in front of the room, whether you are giving a cake, taking a cake, speaking at a meeting, leading a meeting, whatever it is, she said, I require that you wear a skirt or a dress. And I remember hearing in my head, where does it say that in the big book? Right? And today I kind of know where it says that. It says, remember that it was agreed at the beginning that we were willing to go to any lengths to stay sober. Right? And if my sponsor said wear a dress, then that meant that was a length I had to be willing to go to. And apparently this is tonight's length. Oh yeah, I have bent the skirt rule. Nobody has been more creative with skirts than I have. Let me just tell you. But I just remember thinking, oh God, right? And so Crazy Scary took me through the big book. I'll say this and shut up. She took me through the big book, page for page, word for word. She taught me how to identify my disease. She taught me how to identify my solution, so that when I was mad at her, I wasn't dependent on her for my solution. I was dependent on the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous for my solution. You know, if you're new to Alcoholics Anonymous, I beg of you to find somebody who can take you through the big book and help you identify not only your disease, but your solution. You see, my recovery is my responsibility. My happiness is my responsibility. If I want what anybody has here, then I have to be willing to do the work to get it. And today, the truth is that, you know, it's not always easy to do the work to stay here. But at the end of the day, I would rather be here than not be here. And that has not always been true in the last 30 years. There have been days when I have definitely not wanted to be here. But thank God, I have feet that have been trained to go to meetings, to pick up the phone and call a sponsor. I have sponsees who call me. I live in the middle of Alcoholics Anonymous. And if I'm at my happiest is when I live in the middle. I hope you'll join me there. Thanks.